the Gemara mentioned about the different numbers of mishmaros that initially were started with Moshe Rabbeinu. And we have Reb Chama bar Guria in the name of Rav, who had his calculation. And we also had a brisa that had a different calculation. And the Gemara asked, what about, it's a contradiction. You have Reb Chama bar Guria in the name of Rav. How could he say his thing if there's a different brisa that has a whole different calculation? And the Gemara answers that it's no problem because we have a brisa that fits with Reb Chama bar Guria in the name of Rav also. So we have two brises basically, and the two brises are contradictory. And because Rav Chama bar Guria says according to one of them, then that's fine as long as he's following one brisa. You can't ask any questions on him. What he said is basically along the lines of that. It's basically the same, I should say, as one brisa. So the question was, how many mishmaros did it start with? Now we know that ultimately mishmaros. Again, let's get this clear. Mishmaros are the division of the Kohanim and the Leviim for to do the service and sing and so on in the Beis Hamikdash. Kohanim did the service, the Leviim sang. It was divided. We know the number 24, and that's because the time of David HaMelech, it ultimately became 24. But before that, it was either 16 or 8. We have Moshe started 8 mishmaros. Shmuel came and he did. Shmuel came and did 16, and David came and made it 24. That's one brisa. And the other brisa basically says Moshe started with 16, and then it ultimately became 24 when the Bnei Elazar blossomed and became so much. So it ultimately became 24, and so that's basically the two brisas. And it's interesting that the Bnei Elazar blossomed much more than the Bnei Isamar. They doubled. Like it seems the Bnei Isamar seemed to have stayed the same. The Gemara doesn't explain why that was, but that's just the fact. And Elazar ultimately had 16, and Isamar stayed at 8. So that's what the Gemara says. Then the Gemara says that, actually, then the Gemara is the Gemara that we're up to. Okay. Now, before we do this, I just want to mention normally I try to give you try to share with you the discussions of the commentaries, at least to get an idea of what our Gemara is the source for. So one of the things I skipped, and I want to mention it now, I forgot to mention that there is a whole discussion based on our Gemara, not this Gemara, but maybe a page before, about eating a meal before Musaf. And that's based on our Gemara. Our Gemara seems to be somewhat of a proof to possibly being prohibited to have a meal before Musaf. For a practical application of this halacha, think about Simchas Torah. Many shuls make a big kiddush on Simchas Torah, and in order to get the people excited, they make a meal before Musaf, after you do Hallel and before you do the Hakafos. So some places they just do a little kiddush, but there are other places that they actually make somewhat of a meal, especially if they're expecting to get some big donors They want them to get a little drunk because if you're a little high, it's, you're more loose and you can maybe donate more without being, you get rid of your limitations, and so they sometimes make a meal. And there's a shaila if this is appropriate. I don't want to, I don't say anyone does anything wrong, but it's not so simple because our Gemara seems to hint that you're not supposed to have a meal before Musaf. And the source, where is it the source for this in our Gemara? The source for it is that we were talking about Berchas Kayanim, and we said that before Mincha and before Ne'ilah, we spoke about a problem of the Kayanim doing Berchas, the Kayanim blessing the people because they might be drunk. But we said Shachris and Musaf, there's no problem. Shachris and Musaf, we're not worried that the people might be drunk. The Kayanim might be drunk and they're going to do a prohibition of doing Berchas Kayanim when they're drunk. We said it's not a problem, Shachris and Musaf. Why? So seemingly, the reason that it's not a problem is because you're not allowed to have a meal before Musaf. Because you're not allowed to have a meal before Musaf, that's why we don't have to worry if the Kainim are drunk before Musaf. And if that's so, that we don't have to worry. The Mishnah seems like it's a set thing, that there's never an issue of Musaf, of being drunk by Musaf. Basically, it's implying that it's prohibited to eat before Musaf. Now, there is a Gemara in Brachos that says that we do not paskin like Rav Huna, who says that you're not allowed to be toyem before Musaf. We don't paskin now. Rav Huna had said you're not allowed to taste things, have a snack before Musaf. We don't paskin like him. So the simple reading of that Gemara might make someone mistakenly think, oh, we don't paskin like Rav Huna. In the Gemara Brachos, it says this. And that means that you're allowed to eat before Musaf. And so maybe you have a proof from there that it's not a problem to have a meal before Musaf. But the truth is, if you look at the words, it says toyem, tasting. That we don't hold like Rav Huna. Rav Huna said you're not allowed to taste before Musaf. We hold you're allowed to taste before Musaf. You would be allowed to make Kiddush and eat something before Musaf, but you're not allowed to have a meal before Musaf. So that's how that's reconciled with our Mishnah. And with that, and our Gemara, all about the Brisa, I should say, with regard to eating before Musaf, and Kayanim doing Berchas Kayanim before at Musaf, and but basically, that would be a simple understanding that it's prohibited to have a meal before Musaf. This is not accepted according to all opinions, but it seems to be the generally accepted view not to have a meal before Musaf. There is a Bach that argues on this. The Bach holds that you would be allowed to have a meal before Musaf, and it's not really a proof from our Mishnah or our Gemara or the Brisa in our Gemara, because you could say that it's the minhag was not to eat before Musaf, but it's not a prohibition, and therefore al titoish teresi mecha, maybe it's better not to have a meal before Musaf because you shouldn't go away from the way of your tradition. It seems like the tradition was not to have a meal before Musaf, but maybe it's not prohibited. But the other opinions seem to hold that it's prohibited to have a meal before Musaf. So, I don't want to say anyone does anything wrong, but there does seem to be an issue that's more muhudder, maybe not to have a meal before. There's definitely reason to say maybe we shouldn't have a meal before Musaf. If someone's sick, it's another story. But under normal circumstances, it's probably not appropriate, and that would be the source in our Gemara. Yes, David.
We say that one of the things that the Jews were praised for is that they didn't change their names, their Jewish names, when they were in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. But if you look at there's a list of all the names here of all the watches, and
Yeah.
none of the names are like none of the names look like Jewish names. There's
Uh-huh.
no there's no Yosef or Binyamin or Zalman or anything.
Uh-huh.
None of these names are recognizable as Jewish names.
Right, right. It reminds me of there is a tshuva from Moshe Feinstein about having a non-Jewish name. I have to look it up and search it again and see it. I haven't looked at it in many, many years, but there is a tshuva, I know, a responsa from Moshe Feinstein about I wonder, and I think he might mention there something about the names that we find in Tanakh and in the Gemara, maybe Aramaic names and things like that. And I think he brings that up. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, David. I'm going to take a look at Mitzvah Hashem, and I'll try to find it maybe for tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Um, okay, so we're up to page 27A, the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan. It's 2 lines before the end of the page. And if you're in the art scroll, it's 27A3. 27A3, the new Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned, or taught, I should say, in a brisa. The rabbis taught in a brisa, Arba Mishmaros Olu Min HaGoyla. 4 Mishmaros went up from the exile. What does this mean? This means that in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, many Yidden did not leave exile. They stayed in Babylon. They didn't go up to Eretz Yisrael. There was a big, a lot of publicity about getting people to come. And Ezra and Nehemiah tried to get as many people as they could. And unfortunately, not everyone wanted to leave Bavel to go to Eretz Yisrael. There probably were many issues with going to Eretz Yisrael. Maybe life there wasn't as easy, and they were comfortable already in Bavel, and the yeshivas were thriving in Eretz Yisrael. There were a lot of intermarriage there, and so on. It was maybe not the best environment, even though the Eretz Yisrael, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, but nevertheless, there wasn't much Yiddishkeit there. Infrastructure maybe, wasn't really there. Just throwing some ideas why they maybe didn't want to go, but ultimately, in fact, even the Levium, who almost never sinned, the Levium were always making the right choices. When it came to going back to Eretz Yisrael, they didn't seem to want to go back to Eretz Yisrael. And Ezra even made a decree that instead of giving them Meiser, you should give your Meiser to the Koyanim instead of to the Levium. They punished the Levium, that they shouldn't get the Meiser. Instead, it was given to the Koyanim. But anyway, bottom line is not everyone went to Eretz Yisrael. So we just talked about the 24 Mishmaros, the 24 watches that were done in the Beis Hamikdash. And now Ezra went back to Eretz Yisrael with many, many Jewish people. I think the number is 40,000. And they were rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash. And they're going to start doing the Karbanos. And when you do the Karbanos, you have the Mishmaros, the 24 Mishmaros. The only problem was not all of the Mishmaros went back to Eretz Yisrael. Only 4 out of the 24. And so the Brisa says, Arba Mishmaros Olav min HaGoyim. 4 went up from Golus, from exile, to Eretz Yisrael. This is in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, approximately 400 BCE, 330 BCE, something like that, maybe in that ballpark of about, or before the Common Era, about 330 years. No, 310 years, right? Or 320 years. The Beis Hamikdash lasted 420 years. So, and it was destroyed in the year 70. So, from the year 320 and 420, my mind isn't into its mathematical mode. But the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in the year 70 CE, and 420 years before that. What would that be? 420 years before the year 70. Anyone? No one's into the math. If I do it on paper, it'll be a little easier. Let's just calculate it. So the year 350 would be 350 BCE would be 420 years. The Beis Hamikdash lasted, right? So the year 350 BCE, that would be that would be when they went and built the Beis Hamikdash. So only 4 mishmaros went up to Eretz Yisrael. Ve'elohein, and these are them. Yedaya, Charim, Pashkar, Ve'ima. Now, these 4 names are the names of the mishmaros, the names of the watches that each of the families of the Kayanim were like part of these families, and or part of the Kayanim. These are the names of the group. This is just the name they gave to the group. Obviously, that group had children and grandchildren, whatever, and all part of they were all part of that clan, and then of course cousin, whatever, it must, obviously others part, were part of this group as it grew, but it probably started with these names, and then as it blossomed, as the family extended, they all were just called by the name of their great grandfather. So these are the 4 names. Rashi has a big problem over here. He says, where did the name Pashkar come from? It's not one of the 24 mishmaros that it talks about in Chronicles. It gives a whole list in the book of Divrei Yamim Aleph. It has a whole list of the mishmaros, and it doesn't say this name of Pashkar. So where did that come from? So the commentaries struggle to figure out. Obviously, one of the mishmaros of the 24 names, somehow their name had an additional name, Pashkar. That's basically what it must be. Or maybe Pashkar was the son of one of the 24 watches, and that person who the name of the watch was called by, he passed away. And over the 70 years of exile, the son was still alive now. And so maybe the name of the watch was now called by the name of the son, who's probably a great-great-grandfather, but, instead of calling it by the name of the great-great-great-grandfather, they called it by the name of the son, whose name was Pashkar. Anyway, Rashi says Pashkar is not one of the original names of the 24 mishmaros, so you have to figure out why. You have to assume that the name of one of the mishmaros of before either had 2 names, or maybe the son's name was Pashkar, and now since he is still alive, they decided to call the mishmar on his name. And anyway, the other 3 names are names of the earlier mishmaros, and the bottom line is that 20 of the 24 did not go back to Eretz Yisrael, at least at this point. So Amdu Neviim Shebenehem, the prophets among the people, and now we turn to page 27b. they stood in these prophets in the Chilkum V'amidim Alesrim Ba'arba. And there seems to be some need to have 24. You would think, okay, so we only have 4. Let's just lower the number. Okay, we don't have 24 mishmaros anymore. We have a small group. Let's just make 4 mishmaros. The other mishmaros didn't show up, but somehow this number, and it's interesting that the Gemara seems to want this. It seems to want this number of 24, and therefore, what they did was they divided these 4 families into 24 different groups, 24 mishmaros. So they divided them. Okay, they made them into 24. Balalum, they mixed them up. V'nosnum b'kalfi, and put them into some type of a raffle box. So Yedaya was divided into 6. Chodrim was divided into 6. Pashchor was divided into 6, and Amor was divided into 6. So each of these families. Thank you, Mordechai. Mordechai mentions that there's also a kina in Tisha B'Av, one of the laments, or the kinas, the poetic writings on Tisha B'Av that we read talks about the different mishmaros, the watches that were no longer in existence because of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Thank you, Mordechai, for mentioning that. So anyway, let's read this inside. We're on 27b. Yedaya came and he picked the lotto because Yedaya was the first out of these 4. So he picked this raffle and ultimately picked for himself. In other words, his individual family, and then the other 5. In other words, 6, ultimately 6 from his family, and then the same thing. But altogether 6. But Chorim also came and he picked out the lotto for himself, and the portion of his friends, meaning the other elements of his extended family, 6. And v'chein Pashchor, v'chein Imar. Same thing with Pashchor, same thing with Imar. Basically, what they needed to calculate, why did they make this raffle? They wanted to know the order that they should go in. So we understand that Yedaya was first, but what about the other families? How do you decide who should come first? So they didn't just decide. They didn't just decide on their own. They used a raffle. They used this goyrel, and they ultimately came to the number. They ultimately came to the order that it should be in. And they also had to make some decisions here. One of the decisions they had to make was what happens if the other 20 mishmaros start coming back. In other words, we're going to make and develop infrastructure here, the Beis Hamikdash. We're building the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to be changing the landscape of Eretz Yisrael, meaning spiritually, and the other families might start coming. So are we going to give them back their position and in the mishmaros? So the brisa over here says, this brisa tells us, v'chein hisnu neviim shebeneim, the prophets from amongst them made a tanai, they made a condition, they made a ruling that shafilu, even if Yehoyariv Roish Mishmeres, the first of the Mishmaros, even if he is Oile, comes and decides to come to, he goes up to Eretz Yisrael, Lo Yidche Yadayim Em Kaima, lost the place. Yeah, Yedaya is not going to be pushed away from his place because Yehayariv, even though he's first and he should be first because that's the way it was in the first base of Mikdash, but too bad you missed out. You didn't come back when we wanted you. You came back late. You waited for us to do the hard work. So uh you are we're not gonna push Yedaya, who did come back. We're not pushing him away. And Yehayariv will come after Yedaya's families. Now, Ella Yedaya Iker v'Yehayariv Tafiloi. So Yedaya is going to be the main one, meaning that's the one that's going to go first. And then we're going to let Yehayariv go after Yedaya, after all of Yedaya's families. Yehayariv can then be able to do their, can be able to go and do their, to have their mishmar. The only problem is now that'll be 25 mishmaros because we divided it already into 24. And now Yedaya chooses to come back to Eretz Yisrael. He's going to say, well, I need my mishmar. Okay, you have your mishmar. Now it's 25. And it seems like we only want there to be 24. And we don't want to change from the fact that there's officially supposed to be 24. So what they did was they took the 6 families of Yedaya. Now, as we divided Yedaya into 6, and they have to lower that division into 5. They have to re-divide it. In other words, take one of those families and say, instead of you having your own mishmar, you will join maybe 2 of the smaller ones. They'll just join together, something like that. So they would take one of the families of Yedaya and join together with the other one. And ultimately, it ends up being 24. Now, I didn't see anywhere what this idea of 24. Why do we consider 24 to be so important? But the only thing it reminds me of is 24 is the concept of the number 24 does have some element of din, of judgment and strictness. And we find it, there is a story in the Yerushalmi that talks about 24 wagons that went to do kiddush, that went to testify. They went to testify about the new moon, and somehow there was some plague or some.
Turn the video and sound up.
I don't know what that was. So some tragedy happened to these 24 wagons that went to be ma'aber the chodesh to testify about the new moon. And some tragedy happened, and the reason was because the ayin hara affected the number 24. So 24 is connected to somehow the number ayin hara. We also know it from Rabbi Akiva's students that the 24,000 students, it created like an element of judgment. Together with the fact that they sinned, it ended up having, because they sinned, like nagu covered zelazah, they didn't show respect to each other, and they were the number 24,000, that actually affected them in a negative way. So I'm thinking that maybe the number 24 is to counterbalance the negative elements of the number 24, and we dafka want the number 24. I did not see this anywhere. I didn't hear it anywhere. It was just a little thought that maybe has something to, maybe there's some connection here, because these 24 mishmaros are able to be mematek the dina. Maybe it sweetens the strict judgment. But just a little thought. I don't know. But if you see it, we see it here twice. That number one, they don't want to lower the amount of mishmaros. We want to keep it at this at this number. And in other words, even though there's only 4 families went back to Israel, we're keeping it at 24. And we don't want to hire the number either, even though Yehoyarim came back. Yehoyariv came back to Eretz Yisrael, and you said, okay, 25. Nope, keeping it at 24. Yes, David.
There's 2 possibilities I'm thinking. One is that there's supposed to be malachim that rule over each hour in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 24 hours in the day. That means that there's a malach, an individual malach that's in charge of every hour of the day. Second thing I'm thinking of is that was it 24,000? Was that the number also that Mordechai gathered 24,000 children?
No, I think it says 22,000.
Oh, okay.
I think
close.
But,
okay.
Yeah. But I like your first insight. That's a powerful insight. That there's different, and what you mean, I think you also could add to that there's different, the different ways of the different letters of Hashem's name, the different configurations of the letters of Hashem's name in each hour. And so every hour has another energy from heaven. Let me just mute everyone. I'm sorry about the noise. Every hour has another energy from Hashem for that hour. So therefore maybe the 24 correspond to the 24 different configurations of Hashem's name, of Hashem, the 4 letters of Hashem's name for the day and for the night. So maybe that's a connection. And okay, thank you, David. Maybe Betzalel wants to share some thought about the number 24. Betzalel, are you?
He's not with us.
Okay. All right. Well, let's continue over here. So we're up to the 2 dots. B'Yisrael sheba'isei mishmar miskansin ba'arehem b'koirin b'maisa bereshis. The Israelites of that mishmar, they gather in their cities and they read the portion of Maaseh Bereshis, creation of the world. Minohani mili, how do we know this? Or what is the reason? Normally it means how do we know this? But here it seems to mean a little different. It seems to mean like, what is the meaning of this? Or why is this? So why are we reading the portion of creation of the world when we're doing these ma'amodos? The Israelites are gathering in their cities and the shuls, and they're doing this Torah reading that's every day of the week. They're reading the Torah, and they are reading what portion? Creation of the world. I would think maybe they could read about tshuva or something. Maybe they could, maybe like Hazinu is a very special portion. Why are they reading the portion of creation of the world? So the Gemara says, Il mole ma'amodos. If not for ma'amodos, if not for the prayers, these groups of people of Israelites doing their prayers, the ma'amodos, the heavens and earth would not exist. Shenemar, as it says, and this is an interesting midrashic paragraph here. Shenemar, as it says, Vayomer Hashem Elokim. Hashem said to Avram, Vayomer, and Avram said, Hashem Elokim, Hashem, Ba'ma'eda, with what shall I know, ki irashena, that I will inherit the land of Israel? Avram asked Hashem, how do I know? Ba'ma'eda ki irashena. Amar Avram, Rabbeinu Shalom. Avram said, Master of the world, Shema Yisrael chaytan lefanecha. Maybe the Yidden are going to sin. Ato Isalahem kedar hamabul. You're going to do to them like the Dar Hamabul, where you'll flood the world or kill the world out. Uchadar haflaga, and like the generation of the dispersion, and you're going to do the same thing. How do I know that they will really inherit the land? Amar loy, so Hashem said to him, Lav, Amar, Amar loy Lav. He said, no. He said to him, I'm not going to, don't worry. I'm not going to destroy the world. You're going to inherit the Eretz Yisrael. I'm not going to disperse you people. You will have Eretz Yisrael. Amar lefanav Rabbeinu Shalom. So Avram said to Hashem, Master of the universe, Hey Dieni, tell me, let me know, Bama Irashena, with what will I inherit it? In other words, what am I going to do if you do want to destroy us? How will we get atonement if you do want to destroy us? Amar lei, so he said to him, this is this verse. This is this part of the Torah about Avram. We're expounding on it. In other words, the literal story doesn't have any of this. This is the behind the scenes story. The actual story is Avram said, "How do I know I'm going to inherit the land?" And Hashem said, "Well, take these animals, and we're going to divide them in half, and so on." And this is called the bris bein habasarim. And Hashem promises Avram that your children will inherit Eretz Yisrael. But it doesn't have all this discussion. The dialogue is not there. Here, the Gemara gives us the whole dialogue between Hashem and Avram. And Avram's nervous that Hashem is going to destroy the world like the Mabul. Now, you could ask, what do you mean? Hashem promised he's not going to destroy the world like the Mabul, because that's the whole concept of the rainbow, that there's never going to be a destruction like the Mabul. But the thing is that doesn't really prove that Hashem will never destroy the world. He'll never bring a Mabul on the world. But it doesn't mean Hashem can't destroy the world in other ways. So it's similar to the Mabul. Hashem could do something similar, or disperse everyone, and we won't have Eretz Yisrael. And so the Gemara tells us the story is that Hashem said, no, I'm not going to do it. So then he says, well, tell me what should we do if we sin? How do we atone for it? So Hashem says, take for me an egla mishuleshes, a calf mishuleshes, 3 calves, ve'ez mishuleshes, 3 goats, and you'll bring offerings. You'll bring sacrifices. Amar lefanav Rabbeinu Shalom. He says before Hashem, Master of the world, Rabbeinu Shalom. Tainach, this is good, this is fine. Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam. In the time that there's a Beis Hamikdash. Bizman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayam, when the Beis Hamikdash is not in existence, matehei oleim. What's going to happen to them? You're going to destroy them. So how do I know that you're going to always have the Yidden and not destroy us? Amar lo kvar tikanti lahem seder karbonos. I already established for them the seder, the order of the karbonos, bizman shekayrin bahen, in the time that kayrin bahen lafanai, when they read about the sacrifices before me, maila ani alehem, I consider it upon them ki'ilu hikrivam lafanai, as if they brought them before me. V'ani meicha lahem al kol avonoseihem, and I will forgive them for all of their sins. Now, what does this mean? So what it means is that when you read the portion of korbanos, sacrifices, it will be considered like you brought those sacrifices. In this way, we can always get atonement, even if we sinned and there's no Beis Hamikdash, because we could bring the korbanos, we could bring the sacrifices. Now, I'm not sure how this works exactly because the sacrifices work for a sin that was done by mistake. But what about a sin that's done on purpose? How is that going to help us for atonement from Hashem? If Hashem wants to destroy the world, and seemingly it would come more from sins that were done on purpose. And so the fact that we can bring karbonos, how will that help that the sin will be atoned for? So I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that. The thought that comes to my mind is that we could always do tshuva, but the tshuva will make the sin done on purpose into a sin done by mistake, because it'll take away from the element of the sin when we have a great love for Hashem, that the sin caused us to feel so far from Hashem that it'll awaken in us a great love to connect to Hashem. So it'll remove that excitement. In other words, it'll override that whole passion that we had to sin, even that we sinned on purpose, and it'll ultimately make the sin like a mistake. So tshuva may be in addition to this. And then how do you get rid of the mistakes? Get rid of that by bringing sacrifices. And the sacrifice can be done even if there's no Beis Hamikdash, because if we learn the paragraphs about the sacrifices, that will be considered as if we brought these sacrifices, and ultimately we will have atonement. So that's what the Gemara tells us here. Now, one of the questions that's discussed, and there is a debate among the later commentaries, is, does this only work for sacrifices, or does this work as well for any mitzvah in the Torah? For example, you want to learn Zroim. You're going to learn the different mitzvahs of giving tithings. Now, if you learn Truma, Maisvis, Meiser Sheni, will it be considered like you did Truma, Meiser, and Meiser Sheni? Or does it only work with Karbanos? In other words, is this a teaching that applies in general in Torah? That Hashem considers it as if you did Truma, and you did Meiser, and you did Meiser Sheni, and you did other mitzvahs? Or does it only apply and brought Bikurim, even though there's no Beis Hamikdash, but you learned Tractate Bikurim, you brought Bikurim? Does this apply to all mitzvahs, or does it only apply to, in other words, our Gemara says this regarding Karbanos? But there is a discussion. Some say it's only applicable to Karbanos, such a view. There's others that say no, it applies to all mitzvahs. Now, the other discussion that is based on our Gemara, that it's considered, well, the other discussion is, if you think about davening, in many shuls, in many yeshivas, they even skip the karbanis part. And the question is that really appropriate? They want to learn Torah, and therefore they're going to skip the karbanis part. But here you have an opportunity to bring these karbanos, and as our Gemara says, if not for the ma'amodos, the whole heavens and earth wouldn't come into existence. This is a huge opportunity to make Hashem happy with the world by reciting these verses of karbanos. And additionally, it's called learning Torah as well. So you're learning Torah and you're bringing karbanos. So seemingly, this is a very important part of the davening, to the extent that I heard from someone giving a shir. He said that his Rebbe, forget who it was, maybe it's maybe it was from Rabbi Soloveitchik or from Rabbi Herschel Schachter, but he said that he questioned. Person comes late to shul. Maybe instead of skipping karbanos, they should skip Psukei de Zimra and say instead karbanos. In other words, if you have a choice which one to say, he said karbanos sound like it's much more important than the Psukei de Zimra, than the verses in the beginning of the davening, he said. Now, I don't know if he paskined that, but there was a thought at least that he said maybe it should be that way. Anyway, that was just a little insight of his, that the part before the the preliminaries of the davening seem to be more important, maybe even than the verses in the beginning part of davening, which is only a minute. And this is the whole world stands on the karbanis. Okay, anyway, let's continue. Did anyone have any questions? Or okay, let's continue. So it says, I already established for them the Seder of Karbanis. When they read it, I consider it as if they brought it, and I'm moichel them on all of their sins. Oh, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to just look up over here in this Gemara. 1 second. Okay, let's continue. So the next Gemara says as follows: Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis learned in a brisa. Rabbis taught in a brisa. Anshe Mishmar. Let me tell you where we are. We're on page 27b, where the first wide line. If you have an art scroll, we are on 27b1, the bottom paragraph. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Anshe Mishmar hayu mispalim al karban achayim. The people of the Mishmar, they would daven for the karban of their brothers. So it should be accepted willingly by Hashem. The Anshe Maimed miskansin v'esak neses. And the people of the Maimed would go into their shuls, meaning there's the Anshe Mishmar in Eretz Yisrael and Yushalayim, and the Anshe Maimed would go into their shuls, where they're coming from, in their city, and they would daven as follows. V'yoshvin arba tainiyos, they would sit 4 fasts. That's just the term used. They would fast 4 days. And b'sheni b'Shabbos, Monday, b'shlishi, Tuesday, b'Revi, Wednesday, b'chamishi, and on Thursday. What would they pray for? So the people in Eretz Yisrael, they would daven for what? For the sacrifice. They're standing right by the sacrifice. They're davening that the sacrifice should be accepted. The people in the cities, they would actually daven for 4 things. Each day they would have one thing that they were davening. B'sheni al yordei hayom. On Monday, they would daven about those that were in the ocean, traveling, that they should be safe. And the reason for that was because on the 2nd day of creation, Hashem said, that there should be a firmament, the heavens, and there should be a separation between the heavenly waters and earthly waters. And so because of that, there's reason to daven for the Yardei Hayom, those that are traveling by water, by sea, that we daven for them. Especially in the olden days, where it was extremely dangerous when they would travel by sea, many people would not make it out alive. If they didn't know when there was going to be a storm, and if the storm hit, it could have been a tragic situation. Then comes the next day. The Shlishi, Tuesday, Al Holchem and Baros, those that walked in the deserts. And that was also very dangerous. V on the fourth day. Now, what is the connection between the Tuesday and those that walked in the desert? Because Tuesday is when Hashem said, "Let the waters gather together." The Seirah Hayabasha, let the dry land be visible. And what that basically is connected to is people walking on dry land, and they daven that they shouldn't get wounded or killed by wild animals. It should be fit for travel, and at least that's another. Rashi has a interesting wording over here. He says it says v'seirah hayabasha. Literally, it means you should see the dry land. But Rashi says, it's actually a little play on the word. V'seirah hayabasha is seirah as teheruya yabasha lahilcheha. It should be fit for those that walk it. Now, seirah is, instead of it should be seen, the dry land, it's seirah as teheruya. It should be fit for walking, and people shouldn't get wounded. Of course, in the olden days, it was very dangerous, wild animals. And additionally, Rashi doesn't say this, but there was obviously, all different types of thieves and, dangers that dangerous people. Now, on the Wednesday, Baravi'i, on the fourth day, what were they davening for? Again, these are the people that are in their city shul, and they're davening. They're part of the Maimad. They're people of the Maimad. They chose the representatives, and they're davening on Wednesday, Al Asker. Asker was some type of a sickness that unfortunately sounds like it was common then. I think David told us what it was, the diphtheria or something. God, what you told us.
Here it says it's croup, Croup.
Croup. Okay. Shabai nitlu hamayres. Rashi tells us that on Wednesday is when the ma'ires, the lights, were hanged, were placed in their, they were put in their position, and they were hanged up, and meaning the luminaries were hanged up, meaning the sun was put in its orbit and the moon was put in its orbit on Wednesday. And there's another, it's also a play on the word. Ma'ires is from the word me'erais. Yehi ma'erais is me'erais. Me'erais means a curse. And that means that Wednesday somehow was a day that had some negative curse to it that could cause there to be askara, this croup, which was a breathing danger and could cause, it was something that was of great concern in the olden days. Now, the next day was Thursday. Right. So askara, that it shouldn't affect it shouldn't affect the children, kids, and I guess that's right. That croup is something that's, I guess, very applicable to children. That's you find it. And b'chamishi al ubros u'minikos. And on Thursday, they would daven for those that are pregnant and those that are nursing. Ubros, the pregnant people, shalayapilu, the pregnant women, shalayapilu, they shouldn't have a miscarriage. Minikos, the nursing mothers, sheyaniku espeneim, that they should be able to nurse their young ones, their children, their babies. And how is that connected to Thursday? Because Thursday is the day where it says Yishritzu Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh Chaya, that there should be a proliferation of life, and that is the proliferation of the life should sprout out. Yishritzu Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh Chaya, and so that is life, bringing life. So that was the Thursday. So we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Now, what about Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday? We got 4 days of fasting. What about the other 3 days of the week? So the Gemara says that Erev Shabbos Friday they wouldn't fast because of Kavod Shabbos. You shouldn't enter Shabbos with hunger. Kal v'chomer b'Shabbos Atzma, for sure on Shabbos you can't fast. So we got Friday covered, and we got Shabbos covered. What about on Sunday? Shabbos my time alone. Why don't you fast on Sunday? The Anshe Maimon, the people who are praying the rest of the week, of course they ate at night. By the way, they ate at night. So why didn't they fast on Sunday? So my Amar Rabbi Yochanan says because of the Christians. The Christians will be upset if we make a fast day on their day of Yom Tov. You know, the Christians worship their Sunday, and so we, according to this opinion, the reason we don't fast on Sunday is because the Christians, I guess it was dangerous to make a fast day on the day that they believe in rejoicing. So this is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, the reason is because it is the third day of creation, meaning creation of man. Man was created on Friday. So Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. So Friday is man's first day. Then comes Shabbos is the second day. And the third day of his creation is Sunday. Sunday, the third day of creation, the third day of mankind's creation, a person is weak. And the source of that, Rashi tells us, is that it's from the story of Shem. When did Shimon and Levi wipe out the city of Shem? On the third day of their Milah. Why did they do it on the second day or the first day? Because the first and second day, I guess the pain doesn't kick in as fast. The third day is when it's really painful. And that's when they decided that's when there's weakness and so on. And the weakness maybe kicks in on the third day. And so Shimon and Levi wiped out the whole city of Shem on the third day. And the same thing applies on the third day of mankind's creation. And that would be Sunday. So we're not supposed to fast on Sunday. Now, what does that have to do with us? Adam was created and Eve were created on Friday. What about us? But it seems like there's a repetition of the creation and the same elements that are created on Friday. We have a similar recreation, even though, of course, everything in the world is recreated every second. But nevertheless, there seems to be a more, I guess, overwhelming, overriding type of connection that we have to the same way Adam was created on Friday. Something about us is also like recreated on Friday, and therefore we are actually weaker on Sunday. And Reish Lakish says, Reish Lakish says because of the extra soul. David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, he says here that when Rabbi Yochanan do to the Christians, because Sunday's their day of rest, and they would claim that even the Jews give special significance to their special day.
Okay. An interest. Does he have a source?
No. He's the source.
Very good.
Rabbi.
Yes.
In Avodah, if you remember the beginning, it basically says that 3 days before or whatever.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that this is basically the same kind of situation.
Okay, so it talks about not doing business with them 3 days before their holiday.
Or because they're liable to misconstrue it as being that their God gave them or allowed them to have whatever. So I think in this situation as well, I mean, even before David mentioned it, as soon as I saw it, I had a feeling that was the reason why, because Sunday is considered their day of rest. So anything that would appear to be as something that they can misconstrue, you don't want to do.
Right. Well, all David added, I think, if I understood what he said, what he brought from his Gemara is that that they sort of expect the Jews to have, like what the Jews do that day is supposed to help them, so they would get maybe upset. In other words, like we are supposed to be part of their, we're supposed to somehow, our service is supposed to kick in and help their service. But the idea that they could get angry if we negate their fast, their day of rejoicing, I think that's a different element, and I think that's what you're saying. In other words, it could get them upset that we are contradicting their day of joy. You know what I mean? So I think your point is a little different than David's, but I think you're right. I think there's that's what it is. They're going to get upset that not that we need to help them in their holiday, just don't contradict them. Don't. Am I right, David? Is that what you like? What you read was more like we are supposed to be helping their holiday prayer. Is that what you said, David? We're like our prayers are supposed to be supportive of them, and this is not going to work in the spirit of their expectations. But I think the simple understanding is more like what you said, Ezra, and that is like we're worried they're going to get angry if we start fasting, and what they think the whole nation has to follow their holiday. The whole world should be following their thing, and we go and fast. So I guess it could create animosity. So I think you're right, Ezra. All right. Anyway, have a wonderful day, everyone. Sei gesund.